these days. It is lovely to see a room full of human beings together. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our 2021 Rise for Peace breakfast for the Center for Conflict Resolution in Kansas City. Every day, we see and hear about conflicts, both small and large scale, that we know are based in misunderstanding, lack of open dialogue, differing values or opinions. News reports are full of stories of adversity that often end in violence and harm. Yet more and more, I think all of us in this room can say we are searching for, longing for even peace in our lives, for reconciliation and shared understanding. The Center for Conflict Resolution is working throughout the Kansas City community to teach individuals, neighbors, families, and organizations the tools to openly and actively listen to one another, to respect and value one another. Through mediation, conflict resolution, and restorative justice principles, CCR is guiding and working alongside many in our community in building relationships and trust, sharing and hearing one another's perspectives, and in creating the kind of community we must cultivate if we are ever going to change the current trajectory of conflict. And as a community, and I will even dare to say as a country and a world, come together on common ground with deeper understanding and greater care for one another.
It's so good to be here in the room with you all this morning. What a treat for me and for CCR staff and board members to see this kind of support from our community. It's really, really special this morning. I'm Annette Lantz-Simmons. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Conflict Resolution. The last 21 years have steadily formed the vision of CCR that we have today. We see transformation every day in three main areas: schools, youth, adults, and families, in neighborhoods and communities, and with people who are returning to our community from incarceration. As we worked hard to build relationships throughout the KC metro area in local and county government, courts, school districts, law enforcement, the vision has broadened. Along with personal transformation, we're seeing another kind of transformation happening. One that affects entire systems. One that has an exciting capacity for changing more and more people's lives. From children and youth in schools who are benefiting from the use of restorative practices, to neighbors in conflict, solving their differences through mediation and facilitated dialogue, to people on probation and parole, learning skills for communication and finding support for successful reentry. I'm describing a transformation that is helping all of us go from the way it's always been done toward a new focus on inclusion, safety, fairness, trauma healing, and dignity. A focus on the acknowledgement of past and current harm and finding ways to move forward together, meeting needs, and finding peaceful outcomes. I'm very excited to have some of our staff members and some important community partners join me here on stage this morning. We'll hear some stories of personal transformation, as well as some systemic transformation that is occurring in our city. So I would like to invite our first two guests, CCR staff member and community leader, Karen Slaughter, if you'll make your way up, and Major Scott Simons from Central Patrol KCPD, if you'll join me. So you are involved with the effort to grow the Community Interaction Officer program. Can you talk a little bit about the theory or the thoughts behind that program?
Oh, absolutely. So it's kind of the biggest part that I want to make sure everybody understands is we have an emphasis for every officer to have some type of community-oriented look and to be involved in the community. But we also know with the regular officers and their assignments, the different hours that they're assigned and they're on rotating shifts, that it makes it difficult for the communities to reach out to those same officers. So we've assigned a day's community interaction officer and an evening interaction officer. That way the community has a regular contact person that they can reach out to help them with answers about any questions that they may have, some different resources that may be available, or to get some participation to events. So each division station has those two officers that are constantly there, kind of have regular hours, so the community has that same point of contact on a regular basis. But again, the biggest thing that I want to make sure that the community understands, it's an emphasis for every officer to get to know their community. They're kind of assigned areas that they regularly work. So it's important that they meet the people there, try to visit with them on a regular basis. So it's an emphasis for all of us, but we also have those main ones so the community has a direct contact on a regular basis.
Okay. So you spoke to this a little bit, but can you say more about the importance that you see of community officer relationships?
Well, it helps break down some barriers when the officers get to know the members of the community. Because honestly, many times people are calling us at the worst moment. And if they've already been able to bridge some of those gaps, it makes it a little bit easier to talk to us.
Tell us about the listening session that was held at 18th and Vine and the benefit that you saw from that.
Yeah, I really appreciate everything that CCR did in helping set that up. I'll be honest, we kind of, this idea came up and our CIOs reached out to your group and you all ran with it. We just kind of showed up. So it was amazing, all the work and effort that they put into it. So thank you for that. But it was a very interesting perspective. I'd had no idea what to think when we were walking in. I got to be honest, at the time that we had the first one, there was still a lot of unrest going on. I expected to get yelled at a whole lot, which I was ready for it. But your all's approach, the way it was structured and the questions, it really created a situation where the officers were able to engage with the community and we looked towards a common goal. So not only the issues that were affecting the community, it made it easy for the officers to see how it could affect them as well. And we sat at tables and had communications just in circles, but had communications with each other in a nice, even way. I mean, almost immediately it was de-escalated. It seemed like the anger, if there was any, was just gone right away. And we were able to dig into those questions, answer them, and try to come up with some common solutions. Anytime there's conflict, everyone always thinks that there's two sides and that everybody that's involved in this should know exactly what those are. And what I found out many times is either side really didn't know what the real issue was. So when you get a third party that comes in, they have a way to get you to see perhaps some different views that you would have never thought of. So I think it's critical that you can have those organizations like this involved in those because it gets people to talk. Too many times when you're just at a conflict with someone, you really don't have real conversations. You just try to prove your point one way or the other. And the way that you guys bring those conversations about really gets people to understand how different they may be, but how common they may be as well. Yeah. So incredibly important.
Anything else you want to add?
Probably the last thing that I'll add is, I appreciate the skills that I've learned from your group as I've gained more time in my tenure. I think conflict within our communities, within our families, our friends, we need more skills as a society in how to deal with those conflicts. because we're all different. We're all very unique people, and thank goodness we are. Otherwise, it would be a very boring world. But many times, I think we need help to teach us to understand the differences between each of us. And even though that we can be very different, we can still have some extremely common goals. So I appreciate it. And I'll be honest, I used my skills last night with my son because he's a senior. He wasn't turning in his homework. Right. And it started out, my wife and I were yelling, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is going nowhere. And so we just, all right, let's stop. Let's talk about this, And so we had a dialogue back and forth. So thank you for that.
Karen, hello.
Good morning.
As a neighborhood leader, which you have been for a couple years, 30 maybe? What stands out to you about the work that you do at CCR and what CCR does overall?
That listening session was unlike anything I've ever been to before. And what I appreciated about it is it brought together residents from multiple neighborhoods to meet the officers serving their districts. And unfortunately, CIO officers, it's just the two of them, have multiple neighborhoods that they service, so they're not able to attend all of the neighborhood meetings and or events. And it's sometimes spotty as to whether or not you can have their immediate support for something you have. What happened that night is, as I said, something I've never seen before. And as the major pointed out, it was an opportunity for officers and people to find their commonalities, to see that they were more alike than they were separate. And that was indicated to me by the fact that the group broke out into song for what the world needs now is more love. Yeah. I've never had that happen in any meeting I've been in the 12 years I've been serving as a neighborhood leader. So it was absolutely impressive. It was an absolute opportunity for people to make connections, and I absolutely enjoyed it. Is that enough absolute for you?
Absolutely. So we are going to invite Gregory Winship and Michelle Tippy, who is the warden at the Transition Center of Kansas City. Thank you so much for being here. I just met you this morning, so it's really good to meet you. How do you think, so you're involved in the Transition Center, and with a plan to bring a restorative dorm, restorative justice into the facility. Can you talk a little bit about how you think that will impact both the residents and the staff there?
Absolutely. And we won't just have a dorm at the facility. It will be the entire facility. We are working towards an opening in January, and we will have about 150 residents there. So yes, we will be working with all of them in terms of skill building and techniques and classes and programming that they can take home with them in terms of conflict resolution and building the skills and practicing those skills that they need in order to be successful whether they're in the institution, whether they're at work, whether they're in the community, or even in schools.
Okay. What impact have you seen or heard about that the CCR has classes inside the facility? What impact have you seen from that?
I think the biggest change that we've seen is when you can walk down the halls and you hear our residents talking to the others using the techniques and the skills that they've learned in the classes. We're trying to teach everyone that it doesn't matter what your title is, it doesn't matter what your position is or what got you to the situation that you're in. Conflict is inevitable. We all need to have the skills, use the skills, practice these skills. And when you hear peer on peer, resident on resident interacting with each other and using those skills, it's amazing.
Mr. Winship.
Yes, ma'am.
In the 9 years that you've been with CCR, about how many people have you and the other staff worked with in and out of the prison system?
I did not count the number of people. We could get a count, but easily over 1,000 people have taken our core conflict resolution classes, which are 6 weeks of conflict resolution and restorative justice and trauma awareness inside the prison. They liked that so much. After they got out, they said, what else can we do? We started another 6 weeks of an advanced core where we practiced those skills and implemented it there. We've got a Rethink Conflict, a new approach to anger management class that is in the community for people who are on probation and parole or community supervision, court-ordered or PNP ordered anger management. People take those classes. We've done support circles in the community for people on probation and parole who are transitioning from prison to the community, helping them with whatever support services they need. We don't often provide those at CCR, but we work with partners and community partners that do provide the housing and the jobs and the education and those types of things. So all of those people are wrapped up in that number.
I'd like to invite Larry Wilkins and Travanna Alexander, who is the behavioral health manager at Kansas City Public Schools. And so Travanna, we'll start with you. Okay. If you will talk a little bit about the district decision to go fully trauma-informed and adding restorative practices to that. I know you've kind of been in on the ground floor of that. If you'd talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So Kansas City Public School District really started the initiative of becoming a trauma-informed school district probably in 2017 under the previous leadership of Molly Tickner. At that time, we had limited resources to really have a full implementation and have the support and services needed to roll it out district-wide. In 2019, under the leadership of Dr. Letitia Woodley, and I serving as a behavioral health manager, we really adopted a trauma-informed school model, identified the resources we would need to roll out such an implementation, and really started getting in and hitting the ground, making moves. Part of being a trauma-informed school district includes creating safe spaces, teaching and supporting emotional regulation, and building connectedness and relationships, right? Also, partnerships with community organizations that's aligned with the vision. And so the Center for Conflict Resolution aligns with that as we focused on that building relationships piece of trauma informed. So repairing relationships, restoring relationships, and helping individuals understand how relationships are the driver of change really aligns nicely with our mission and what we're looking to do. And so that really helped us implement restorative justice practices throughout our district. I will say that Sarah Eblin and Reginald Berry, who are not here this morning, really kind of brought the restorative practices to the forefront as they initiated this framework in Southeast High School and looking at the data from their practice and what they were doing there. It was decided that this was something we wanted to see district-wide so we can see that positive impact throughout the district.
Is there an advantage you see to having an organization like CCR as a partner?
Absolutely. You know, I think it was something you mentioned earlier today, and I said I wanted to make sure I mentioned it up here and I forgot. But it helps when you have, it was that neutral party, right? Someone mentioned that, I think. And it's, we have an area of expertise and we can provide education. We build relationships with educators and other individuals within our system. But it's received differently when you have someone that's neutral coming in and reinforcing those same concepts, providing that additional education. So they say, it's not just Travanna saying that because Travanna wants it done that way, right? So having that neutral organization come in with your guys' expertise in the arena really helps push forward the reason, the logic, kind of gives the theory, lays the foundation for what we need. It also helps because when we are talking about repairing relationships and restoration processes, it's not just between educators and students, but also between administrators and educators and us all as a system. And having that neutral person or party in those situations really tends to be beneficial.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Wilkins.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Is there a story that comes to mind when you think of transformation?
Absolutely. I was working in a particular charter school. This was maybe a couple weeks ago, actually. And it was a situation in the lunchroom between a group of young men. They were fighting. We were able to get the young men separated and placed in safe places in the building. Come to find out that the fight was 3-on-1. About a week later, I was able to facilitate a family conference or a restorative conference with all of the parents and the young men. The conference went really well. The young men apologized to each other. Both sides were able to voice how they felt and what was the reasons behind their actions. The parents were able to create dialogue between each other about some of the challenges that they face. In this particular case, as single mothers and raising African-American young men in urban areas. So to me, that was very inspiring on, just the line of work that I do, as well as motivating for the parents to want to do better, to actually sit in a space and hear that someone else is kind of sharing some of the same issues and things that you're going through. I think it was a very transformative process because everybody walked away with an understanding of how to talk it out versus fight it out. And I think that skill that they learned that day in that 2-hour long process is something that will help them in the future deal with conflict as it happens again.
Please join me in thanking leadership, staff, and volunteers for all the wonderful work they do. I love this organization. I hope you can tell. And I'll tell you why. When we're faced with such a monumental problem like systemic violence in our city, it's so easy and not irrational at all to kind of feel powerless. I'm just one person. What can I do to not only just start to address the problem? What can I do to fix it? When I joined the board over 13 years ago, I just wanted to work with others that had the passion for the city, the passion to work to make our community a better place. And I wanted to be, in some small measure, part of the solution. And truth be told, that's why you're all here today. You all know there are big problems out there, and you individually can't solve them yourself. But through your support, through your investment in CCR, each and every one of you has chosen to be part of the solution.